Forbidden Forest. The Divided Region, Book 2, by D.J.J. Watson. Chapter 17. The rain subsided, but the thunder did not. Mud caked Darius's boots, which lacked proper teeth to grip the slippery earth. He eventually re-emerged in the clearing hours after leaving it. It was deadly quiet, with only scattered leaves and 1,000 footprints crisscrossing the sludge. The steel spirits were gone, and with no obvious tracks belonging to a particular direction, so too was his cohort. "Janga, Alea!" Darius called out, his voice disturbing a flock of birds in the distance. He took a deep breath, his lungs burning from exhaustion. He stared up at the canopy that pitied him, wondering if they were okay, and whether they would ever reunite. The forest was vast and maze-like. A mile was more than enough space to lose oneself forever. Darius sheathed his sword and gently prodded his shoulder. Even with his inch-thick armor, it met his touch with an aggressive reply. When he reached for Alicia's remedies, the pouch was not there. He panicked, searching the area vigorously for it, but to no avail. The salves, healing grass, everything were gone. Dread rose within him like a plume of smoke. Without them, his injury would worsen, and this wasn't the place to fall ill a second time. He searched his breast pocket again, feeling a thin piece of yarn. When he pulled it out, it was the trinket Alicia had given him. Thankfully, it was saved from falling out, unlike the remedies. While it wouldn't slow his wound's deterioration, it brought him some comfort in this dire moment. Darius studied the opening once more, his eyes darting about the many trees. Night drew in like it always did in this part of the world. The thought of the steel spirits returning was enough of an incentive to move. If the others were alive, he needed to track them down, despite the futility of it. He left the clearing and followed the wide path they should have all traveled down together. Humidity returned to the forest, turning his trek into something more arduous. Just as the last embers of daylight ebbed away, a rocky fissure appeared in the distance. Darius squinted, asking his eyes to discern more. The entrance was merely a split on a much larger wall. It was a perfect shelter. He reasoned if they stopped anywhere, it had to be here. Hope lit within him like tinder, adding haste to his feet. He moved forward, careful not to disturb too many leaves and twigs. The chasm was the size of 3 tall men, but wide enough to accommodate a horse. Without telling what lay beyond the veil of darkness, he could tell by the cool breeze emanating from it that a vast cave network awaited. He found a dry stick by the jagged opening and gathered up stale leaves. Darius wasn't the most adept at starting fires, but he had a modest success rate. He sourced a worthy piece of flint and sat down, striking it repeatedly with his dagger. After what felt like an hour, he caught a spark and puffed at it gently. The brittle foliage soon crackled and folded inwards. He fed more to the hungry flame until it burned bright enough. Using his spit as a binder, he stuck leaves onto the stick and lowered it into the heat, igniting the makeshift torch. Darius stood and stamped out the fire before the smoke could attract any unsavory characters. He hovered by the entrance as doubts gathered around, like royal advisors. There was no way of telling for certain whether Alea, Jangar, or the other 2 were inside, but it was a chance he had to take. For all he knew, they too may have separated. He waited for his eyes to adjust to the lack of light before entering the chasm. When he did, the cool air took on a sharper edge. Like an ocean, the deeper he traveled, the colder it became. With a watchful gaze, he studied the cracks and pebbles that stepped out from the shadows. His nerves were on fire, even when his body wasn't. He kept vigilant, listening for any discrepancies that warranted the unsheathing of his sword. Darius eventually had to stop to breathe hot air on his hands. The chill became so unbearable that the simple act of holding a torch was too painful to bear. He glanced back at the cave entrance, the gaping hole nothing more than a distant pinprick. The thought of turning around was no better than the one telling him to keep moving on. When a sickly glow flickered further ahead, his heart leapt into motion. Jangar? Aliyah? Darius paced forward with urgency. He chased the light, but they didn't swell as they should. When an icy yet melodic sound came from behind, he froze to the spot. He gingerly turned around, his mind and body reeling from the possibilities. Dozens of orbs floated like bright specks of dust. They swarmed him, transforming into armored apparitions. Shattered helmets covered some of their faces, while others were merely just clumps of grey flesh. They pressed inwards, their swords and maces, stained from century-old battles, pointed at his body. He sheathed his sword, but there was little point. To wield it was to let the many jagged tips sink into his mortal coil. Among a sea of blue eyes emerged a brighter set. Darius stared into them, feeling a sense of recognition as the figure appeared in the pool of light. The thought suddenly hit him square in the chest. It was the spirit he faced 10 summers ago. "You're a long way from home." Its voice was as icy as the air. It was clear, yet hinted at an Elronian accent. "What brings you here a second time?" Darius's throat tightened, the muscles threatening to close off his windpipe. He could not believe he had stumbled into the dead's lair. He studied the numerous grimaces that demanded an explanation from him. "Answer me, boy." "I'm looking for my men. A Vlencian," he said calmly, the atmosphere shifting. "How many of you are there?" 3. I mean 5. Darius's words barely escaping his lips. This was unlike any normal foe. Their presence alone was enough to instill all the fright a man could endure. They didn't just promise death. They also promised the consumption of your soul. The steel spirit stopped and stared at Darius. It was as if he could observe his beating heart and thoughts. "Do you know who we are?" he asked. "Steel spirits." "No, we are warriors of Elron, betrayed by the king your people laud as a hero, Valentius Rakes." Darius's gut sunk to his rear. Any hope of a clean death was now gone. "What happened?" he inquired, wanting to at least take some truths to the grave. The steel spirit chuckled, but it was unlike any living laugh, for it lacked warmth and spirit. Once his bones ceased aching like old floorboards, he groaned. He broke the agreement with Elron only weeks after the great battle, of trade and enduring peace. Darius struggled to grasp what he was saying. It was at odds with everything he knew. It was said that Elron was the one that turned their backs on House Rakes, not the other way around. Valentius was a cunning man. His desire to conquer the north was too strong, too all-consuming. He wanted the kingdom for himself. Vrakor's corpse was still warm when he had us slain and buried in this very forest. A profound sense of shame fell upon Darius. If his surname was a coat, he would have gladly discarded it. Concerns over his mortality gave way to fears of a different kind, ones involving the fate of Estos if Dilian gained the crown. What false histories would be written then? A sudden burst of bravery shone through. "You must let me go." The ghost warriors parted for the steel spirit. Following his bright blue eyes were arcs of lightning that danced across his armor and scabbard. Darius watched as loose clumps of hair clung to his sunken cheeks like tufts of decayed grass. The entity was just how he remembered him, tall, fierce, and ungodly. He shuddered to think of what he was like on the battlefield when he was alive, if this was how he was in death. "You'll never leave this place, Vlencian," he warned, unsheathing his legendary blade. "And when will your souls rest?" "Once we've spilt Rakes' blood." Darius felt the color drain from his face. His body became heavy, his head dizzy. The other spirits created room for his departure to the next realm. Just as he pulled his sword back, Darius blurted out, "Then you have what you wish for." The steel spirit halted. "I am Darius Rakes, son of King Robic Rakes. I am also the living blood relative of Valentius." His voice grew limp towards the end. The spirit's face twisted in anguish, his eyes narrowing into blinding pinpricks. With his free hand, he gripped Darius's throat and lifted him into the air. "You lie!" "I'm not." Without warning, he released Darius and took his right hand, slicing a clean line through it. "You would be foolish to profess such words if they weren't true," the steel spirit said, as he brought the bleeding palm to where his nose should have been, inhaling the metallic aroma. "Spare me, and I will right my ancestors' wrongs." The dead warriors groaned as Darius's blood permeated the air, drumming up a tense atmosphere. The spirits began to circle closer, their ethereal fingers outstretched like claws. Their nasal cavities twitched as they picked up the scent of his lineage. The steel spirit's face suddenly contorted as he lifted his head to the jagged ceiling. His throat emitted a low growl, which was quickly followed up with a punch to Darius's sternum, sending him across the sanctum. "He is indeed of Rakes blood," the entity snarled. "I say we kill him and finally get the rest we deserve." A thunderous cry erupted from the dead warriors, shaking the earth with their collective rage. Swords and spears were thrust into the sky in a menacing display of force. The lead spirit held his blade aloft, ready to send Darius into the otherworldly abyss. In a moment of despair, he blurted, "Vrakor lives!" The roars subsided, replaced by a deafening silence. The steel spirit's withered face was etched with a mixture of confusion and disbelief. "You speak untruths." "I am not. He's amassing an army in the shadows of Cordon as we speak." "Lies," the steel spirit growled. "We slayed him with these very swords." "But you did not destroy his body." The ghosts exchanged nervous glances. It was clear he didn't speak in falsehoods, for such a fact failed to make the scrolls of history. "That's why I'm here," Darius continued. "I must get to Vlencia before it's too late, for only I can stop him." Anger drained from the entity as he lowered his weapon. Darius could see the contemplation on the steel spirit's face, if you could call it that. The other Wraith warriors were still wary, but they too were beginning to consider his words. "If you kill me, you grant my brother the throne, and if there is ever a reincarnation of Valentius, he is it. I am Elron's only hope of an honest Vlencian king. Kill me, and our nations shall perish to Vrakor. Spare me, and I'll do what my forefathers refused to do and fulfill the centuries-old agreement for peace. Our king will never lend you his ear. Then help me bridge that divide. If he won't listen to me, he will most certainly indulge you. We're the dead. Even more reason why he'll listen." The sanctum fell quiet, and all that he could hear were his rapid breaths and raging heartbeat. "History will herald you as the men who saved Elron from doom, not once, but twice. That is all I have to say." Darius bowed his head in surrender, waiting for a response, a word, a killing blow, yet none came. When he glanced up, the steel spirits had disappeared as if swallowed by the shadows. Clutching his shoulder, he staggered to his feet and held his torch out. Nothing. Had they accepted his proposal, or was he simply spared? Darius hovered there for a while, half hoping, half dreading their return. "I will find you when the time is right." Chapter 18. Darius limped through the labyrinth and reached another exit. A slit appeared through the darkness, the fresh air welcoming him back to the outside, even if his wounds didn't. The torch had since died, but thankfully it held out long enough to get him out. It was night, so straying into the forest was too much of a risk. He settled a short distance away from the entrance and waited until the morning. He cast a wary glance behind at the black void, the encounter with the steel spirits forever seared in his mind. Should he be fortunate to reunite with his companions, they wouldn't believe him. Nobody would. Speaking with the dead was one thing. To negotiate his freedom would have them questioning his sanity. He glanced down at his shoulder, cut hand, and slashed midsection. Some of his wounds had hardened into scabs, while others were still fresh, seeping out blood and vigor. Darius leaned his back against the sharp edge of the rock wall and exhaled. As soon as he rested his head, fatigue washed over him, and his eyes shut on their own accord. He dreamt of the forest, the tribe, his traveling party, the reptile that burst from the lake, and the steel spirits. No detail was missed, no event out of sequence. He felt all manners of emotions rip through him. Then, amid the images, came a radiant light that eclipsed everything else. It swelled and shone as bright as the sun, soon giving way to precious sounds, the gush of running water, the tweeting of birds. A ring of giant green leaves emerged, forming an umbrella over a crystal-clear spring, sheltering it from the sun's harsh rays. It reminded Darius of the small utopia they discovered days ago. Only this one possessed even more magic. Goosebumps lifted his skin and radiated a thrilling warmth that made his heart flutter. He looked down at a bare torso and shoulder that bared no cuts, no marks of his battles. There was neither thirst to quench nor hunger to satiate. A serene smile crept across his face. He felt like he had been born again, with none of the baggage of his previous life. "Darius," came a voice. It was soft, yet reassuringly familiar. He looked ahead and saw a slender figure by a rocky ledge. She was naked from the belly button up, her dark nipples hidden behind the curls that draped over her breasts. "Alicia?" he said, tiptoeing towards her. Her almond eyes had a radiant glow, and her lips curled into a smile that could melt the coldest of hearts. "What is this place?" "Come." She took his hand and began guiding him down the naturally formed steps. "Let's swim." When the water met his feet, he tensed. "I thought you were a man of valor," she teased. Darius studied her perfectly sculptured shape, careful not to linger for too long. There was no denying his attraction to her. She was a woman worthy of gods, let alone men. The warm light flooded her skin as the scent of wildflowers carried off from her. Even her hair was a spectacle. It may have been matted, but it sparkled like the stars of a night sky. Once Darius got over the initial shock of the spring, he waded deeper until his square chest submerged completely. He gasped, earning a playful giggle. Among his shrunken manhood, his skin took on a darker tone. He gazed up at the shimmering canopy, drinking in all the sights, smells, and sounds this small piece of paradise offered. "Why can't I stay here forever?" "You can," said Alicia. Darius cast his gaze down at her. "You read thoughts too?" "Maybe," she teased. They stared deeply into one another as soft ripples washed over their chests. Every fiber in his being willed him forward to embrace her warmth, taste her scent, and drink her beauty. "I see you're wearing it," she said. Surprised, Darius traced a hand over the trinket that only moments ago was absent. Alicia's hands suddenly gripped his and pulled him close, her eyes and silken ebony hair all consuming. "Would you like to take me as your woman?" Darius's stare was incredulous. She struck him as shy and conservative, not the kind to offer herself to a man she barely knew. "But I do know you," she said. "That isn't true." "Then let us learn each other." He looked away, almost ashamed of what he had to say. "Not now. There is much of a journey still left, and it would be unfair to make promises I might not keep." "Then abandon your quest and stay here with me." "I cannot. I'm sorry." She released him, disappointment enveloping her face. He wanted so desperately to lean in and console her, to tell her words that would bring about her smile once again. "Alicia," he grazed her forearm, "my men gave up their freedoms to follow me on this path. I cannot turn my back on them. You must understand this." "And have they not abandoned you?" Her question hit him in the stomach. She sensed his displeasure and quickly apologized. "Forgive my insolence. I just cannot deny my affection for you, Darius." As I cannot for you, I will respect your choice. But promise me one thing. You'll not marry another when you become king." He recoiled, sending a wave of ripples around the pool. The conversation went from strange to uncomfortable in mere seconds. He stepped back, regarding her differently. "Come on, I know who you are, Darius." Her voice took on a deeper, unrecognizable tone, a growl almost. "You are Prince Rakes and threaten my rule." A heaviness expanded in his core as he shook his head in denial, continuing to backpedal in the water. Elysia stayed motionless, wearing a smile that no longer carried warmth. An unseen bird leapt off the branch above, stealing Darius's attention for a moment. When he returned, it wasn't Elysia standing in the spring with him, but a hulking figure that cut a silhouette in the sun. The branches that once stood over the water had since turned into charred stumps, their leaves folding to the flames that licked them. Darius scrambled to the edge of the pool, awestruck over his armor. Forged in the hottest of fires, it was darker than the blackest of nights, and covered every inch of his body. Spikes, easily the size of daggers, sprouted from his shoulders and chest like a thorny plant. In one hand hung a longsword that dwarfed those belonging to the steel spirits. In his other was a mace strong enough to crush the skulls of 10 stallions. It was a display of strength that belonged only to gods. Only, this was no god. This was the Dark Lord. Darius turned to reach for the stairs, but they were replaced with walls too high to scale. Still, he tried, only for his grip to falter. There was no escaping the spring, nor this nightmare he found himself in. He spun back around and watched as the water gave rise to bubbles and a humid mist that choked him out. "What will you sacrifice?" Vrakor's voice was like a serrated knife cutting through paper. 2 red eyes poked through his helmet, igniting a fear within Darius so profound he could not utter a response. The Dark Lord waded through the bubbling spring with immense speed and hoisted Darius out of the water by his throat. "I will give you everything you desire." His breath stunk of sulfur and fire that had burned for centuries. "All you must do is pledge your allegiance to me." Darius clawed at the strangling arm, the pressure bringing about strong dizziness. He could feel his pulse thrashing against his ears like that of a tribal drum. The more he struggled, the tighter the grip became until his voice was nothing more than a squeal. "Serve me, or perish with everything you hold dear," hissed Vrakor. The ultimatum replayed in his head as the light of the spring evaporated, and he awakened from the nightmare in a series of strangled gasps. He sat upright and clawed at his throat to dislodge the iron grip that no longer existed. When he realized he was back in the cave, he heaved a sigh of relief for a few meager breaths. Everything about that dream, that nightmare, felt too vivid, too visceral, to be a play of a weary mind. No, it served as something more. A warning sent by the Dark Lord himself. As sweat pooled down his face, he fought to remain upright, but his body was too stiff and painful to sustain such a posture. So he sat there, hunched forward, like a man down on his luck, contemplating his past, his present, and the bleak future he barely treaded towards. There, amid his self-pity and the haze of a fractured night's sleep, stirred a drive to stand up and find his friends, wherever in the hells of this forest they may be. He didn't know how. He didn't even believe he could. He just knew he had to try, for his life and all those who lived in this forsaken region depended on it. Chapter 19. Darius staggered through a dense part of the forest. It had been 3 grueling days since he lost contact with the group. Outside of insects and the occasional dead bird, his stomach was a void with nothing to digest. He rested by a tree and dangled his water skin over his parched lips, but only a single drop fell. There was no way of knowing where he was, or whether he would reunite with the others. There were no tracks to discern, No clear direction to follow. He was lost, and dangerously alone. "Jangar! Alir!" he yelled, straining over his scorched throat. His cries reverberated through the forest. No reply. He collapsed to the ground and sobbed, rocking back and forth, clasping his sweaty forehead. His hands trembled violently. The Grillithia was winning. He was slipping ever more into insanity's pit of despair. The rustle of leaves and twigs snapped him out of his bout of misery. Darius looked up and saw a juvenile boar foraging in the distance. It was as if the sky gods had delivered his salvation. He heaved himself to his feet, almost passing out from the effort, and stumbled to the nearest tree. Unsheathing his dagger, he crouched from one trunk to the next, careful not to alert his quarry. The wild pig was uncoordinated in its movement and bore an old gash that claimed its right eye. Darius's body tensed with adrenaline and excitement, his heart hammering at a nauseating speed. If he was successful in killing the animal, there would be enough meat to last him days. All he could see was reuniting with Alir and Jangar and exiting this forsaken forest. Darius readied his dagger. As it came within striking range, he leapt from behind the tree and lunged towards it. The first cut was clean, but the boar squealed and charged at him. Its frenzied attacks were at odds with its injury, as blood poured down its face. Using his weight, Darius pinned the animal to the ground, leaves flying everywhere. The boar's skin was thick, but not enough to protect it from 2 more gashes to the neck. To his surprise and horror, the small beast didn't let up. It kicked and thrashed, stopping him from delivering the killing blow. He gripped onto it as hard as he could, but the blood made it difficult to contain. The wild pig squirmed and squealed, blasting his eardrums. Inch by inch, second by second, it was wriggling free. "No!" Darius gasped. He dropped his dagger and scrambled for control. Gripping its neck, he felt the lifeblood pulsing through its veins. It rammed its head into Darius's chest, sending him reeling. By the time he got to his knees, the animal zigzagged into the nearby shrub, leaving behind a trail of crimson. Darius knelt on the bed of dry leaves and stared endlessly after it. His jaw fell open, but no words left his lips. He was numb, his entire body dead inside. It was as if he'd taken a swing to the stomach, rendering a hollow statue of himself. Never in his life had he felt so useless, so worthless, so broken. He could see the magnitude of his failure stretch out into the coming centuries like an unwinding road. Tears slid down his face as he sobbed quietly, his raked body trembling. The blood on his hands dried, crusting over his skin. It was at that moment he sensed something preside over him. A deep silence overtook the forest as it landed behind him, the hairs on his neck standing erect. With difficulty, he got to his feet and turned around. The sight almost buckled his knees. Vrakor, the haunting figure of his dream, stood before him, his spiked armor releasing a sinister clink with each breath he took. His red eyes locked onto him, the pupils dilating to reveal the oblivion within. Darius wanted to run, but his body wouldn't allow him. He had no more to give, no energy to draw upon. The Dark Lord slithered around him, black spikes jutting from his gloved knuckles. Darius staggered backwards. "I know you're not real. You chose not to pledge. Now you must pay a penance." "The dagger," Vrakor said in a smoky voice, pointing to his waistline. Darius glanced down at the weapon lying among the leaves, bloodied from the boar's struggle. A strange sensation fell over him. It was like he had become seduced by the blade, for all the panic and hesitancy melted away. "Take it." Darius hesitated. He wanted not to listen, but he was compelled to heed the Dark Lord's words. They were absolute and impossible to disobey. He retrieved the dagger and studied it, its handle soft, yet full of grip. He placed it in his palms, his fingers gripping the hilt like old friends. "Your heart." The blade shook tremendously as he turned it around to face him. The tip edged ever closer to his chest, just beneath the nipple. Darius shuddered and grunted through dry lips. Even though there was a strong seduction, his mind screamed for him to drop the weapon, to flee, to live. But he couldn't. It was as if he was the puppet, and Vrakor was his master. "Do not fight it." Darius gulped and closed his eyes, the dagger pulsing towards him. A blistering pain erupted somewhere near his heart. He opened his mouth, but no scream or cry poured out. As the agony intensified, a survival instinct kicked in, and he stopped the blade from plunging any further. When he looked, Vrakor was gone. In his place stood a dark impression of trees and leaves. "Darius!" He thought he heard a distant voice. "Darius!" It came again. This time it sounded like a leer. He slowly turned around, the dagger protruding from beside his sternum. Alir and Jangar appeared. They swam in and out of focus, panic etched on their faces. A warm fogginess swirled, rocking Darius back and forth like a tree against violent winds. He collapsed to the ground, smiling. Chapter 20. Darius awoke to the cool air as the crescent moon shone like a beacon in the sky. There was nothing obstructing it. No trees, no canopies, not anything. Just uninterrupted stars that shimmered far away. He laid on his back, wondering where he was and how he got there. His mind was a field of mist, his memory fogged over. The last thing he remembered was Vrakor, then Alir and Jangar, before collapsing. He tried to sit up, but his stiff body forbade him. Craning his neck to the side, a fire radiated a healthy distance from the shoreline, illuminating the area. 3 men sat by it, gnawing away on something. Food. When the stench of the lake hit Darius, he doubled over and coughed, his eyes watering. "Told you it's enough to wake the dead," Jangar said, a smile tugging on his hard features. The 3 men ceased eating and rushed over to Darius. He didn't see the wet rag that quickly met his chest, but he writhed and moaned in pain. "Sorry, brother, it must be done," said Alir. Although he loathed the agony, it was good to hear his friend's voice again. "You had us worried for a moment, tittling." Jangar cradled his head to guide some water into his parched mouth. Darius clutched the water skin and emptied it of its contents in a matter of seconds. His stomach expanded and made all kinds of sounds. "Easy now. You'll do yourself in if you guzzle too fast." Helmand hovered over Alir, his face laced with a frankness that left Darius guessing what was wrong. Were his wounds dire? Would he die? He looked around before asking in a frail voice, "Where's Gorwald?" Everyone fell silent. It was clear something grave had happened. "He didn't make it," Helmand murmured, his chin resting on his chest. "The ghosts outnumbered us." "There was nothing we could do," Jangar added. Darius clenched his jaw, his chest tightening. Gorwald had been a pleasant fellow in the short time he knew him, quick to mediate and find common ground among the group, which was critical if they were to survive the Grilithia. Now he was gone. "This forest has cost you dearly," Darius said. "I'm sorry for your loss." Helmand exhaled sharply. "Don't be. He would not tolerate us pitying his death." But his gaze lingered on the ground, and the firelight reflected something wet in his eyes before he turned away. "You're lucky," Alir added. "Your ribcage halted the blade from sinking any further." "What were you thinking doing that to yourself?" Jangar huffed. "Good job we found you when we did." Darius coughed, prompting the others to comfort him. "I can't remember what happened. I was losing my mind." "You lost it a long time ago, Tittling. We followed your tracks each day, but you always evaded us," Alir said. Darius digested every word spoken. It brought warmth that no other gesture could lend him on this cool night. "Thank you for coming back," he croaked, his eyes welling up. "I had lost all hope of ever being found." Alir squeezed his good shoulder. "The Grilithia is over now." The weight of his words settled upon Darius like a heavy blanket. The trial had stolen almost everything from him, his health, his mind, and nearly his life. It brought him to his knees in ways no other ordeal had, not even his unjust exile. A tear trickled down his cheek. He was too weak to wipe it. "I don't want to piss on anyone's parade, but we still aren't out of this mess just yet," Jangar grunted. "Where are we?" Darius strained his eyes beyond the fire's glow. All he could see was the dark wall of pointed trees in the distance. It was like staring into the bottom of an inkwell. "Where the elder told us we would be," Alir replied, "although we're much further from the water this time." Jangar brought some meat to Darius, who sunk his teeth into it without hesitation. The flesh was succulent and wholesome. He didn't care what it was or how it ended up in his mouth. "Boar," Alir withdrew the wet rag. "The sky gods gifted it to us not long after finding you. It wasn't missing an eye, by any chance?" Jangar and Alir shared a bewildered look. Darius gulped down the last morsels and rested his head before closing his eyes. He feared that if he left them closed, he would lose himself in the realm of nightmares once more. "Get some rest, brother. You'll need it for tomorrow. We'll wake you when daylight breaks." Darius nodded as a wave of drowsiness rolled over him. He could feel his apprehension melting away as sleep once again lulled him into its waiting arms. He did not remember drifting off, nor any dreams he had. Morning came and a gentle shake roused him. It was Alir. The sky was no longer black, but a swirl of red, yellow, and purple, with pockets of clouds floating in a collective direction. "You needed that, didn't you?" "I would have enjoyed more," Darius groaned. His friend helped sit him up, though it was difficult. It took a moment for the fog to clear from his head, but when it did, he inhaled the glade's muted presence. The lake was just as calm as it was when they first staggered out of the tree line. However many days ago it was now. His eyes hovered over the water with great suspicion, knowing full well what monstrosities lurked beneath its serene surface. Jangar and Hellmund were slow to rise, their glum faces hypnotized by the ebbing fire. The world spun, but eventually settled by the time Alir helped him to his feet. They were ready to leave this forsaken place, and would hopefully never see it again. Jangar stamped out what embers remained, sending ash and loose debris into the gentle breeze. He and Alir carried Darius and began the long journey across the glade. "Could you not have done this whilst I was asleep?" Hellmund was the only one not to laugh, for losing Gorwald and his brother had clearly taken its toll. Darius felt compelled to say something, to offer words of comfort, but couldn't find ones worthy enough. They continued on a straight path as the morning sun fanned out in patches across the glade, the vibrant colours lending him strength to keep one foot in front of the other. "Do you think they'll come back for us?" Alir quizzed. "If they do, I bloody hope it's soon," Jangar moaned. "I've never been much of a walker." "We can tell." The big man shot a glare at Alir. "This is muscle, not fat. Whatever makes you happy." Darius's gaze settled on a dark object some distance away. It was small, but gradually grew like a flock of approaching birds. Jangar and Alir continued to go at each other, unaware of the spectacle unfolding ahead of them. Hellmund stopped and raised his hand. "What is it?" Alir asked. "Shh." He held a finger to his lips. He took a few steps forward, squinting into the distance. The object grew into distinct shapes and colours. "It seems you have your wish," Hellmund exhaled. "The cavalry has arrived." Darius wavered on his feet, his mind torn between relief and worry. Just as he was leaving one battle, he was about to be escorted to another. Chapter 21. They were led through the hamlet with an urgency unlike before, their boots echoing off the damp surfaces. The guardsmen didn't care how hurt or weary they were. If anything, they appeared offended by their survival of the Grillithia. Darius walked unassisted, his torso racked with pain, as he placed one foot in front of the other. Droves of villagers poured out of their tents with lanterns, their faces painted with horror. It was as if they were watching ghosts being escorted through their town. "I cannot believe it," one said. "The Spirit Mother spared them," gasped another. A few brave souls pushed their way to the front, only for the guardsmen to force them back. Darius and his company staggered through the village as more people flanked them. When Alicia appeared, he halted. A torrent of feelings rose to the surface as her gaze met his. She reached for his hand discreetly, and he greeted it with a squeeze that spoke what words couldn't in that moment. A guard struck his bad shoulder, immediately causing Darius to withdraw his hand. "Move," he barked, shoving him along before turning his attention to Alicia. "Step back, healer." They were escorted to a part of the hamlet Darius hadn't seen until now. A group of people gathered below one of the cavern's gaping holes in the ceiling. While fresh air swooped in, it did not take the damp odor with it. "Halt," the guard commanded. Darius and the rest of his cohort shared a foreboding glance with one another. A large trench sat between them and a band of silent spectators. Rigma and Roos stepped forward from the mass, their faces nothing more than cemented frowns. It was clear they would have preferred corpses standing before them rather than the living. Darius surveyed the ditch. It could have easily housed a dozen men, but going by the depth and slick clay walls, it was designed to keep you inside. When he came upon dark splotches of dried blood, the realization suddenly dawned on him. This was the pit. Bile rose in his gorge, his mind and spirit reeling. He was far from ready for this duel. "It's so good to see you all breathing." Rigma's face glowed from the guards' bright torches. He stared directly at Darius. "You have made my task infinitely easier. I feared you would die before I could have my fun with you, but your gods have taken kindly to my prayer." The clansfolk gathered around in sheepish silence. Alicia pushed her way to the front, her face awash with worry. "Can this not wait one more day?" Darius shifted his weight onto his right leg. "We are tired, hungry, and in need of rest. Do you not want a chance to win back your freedom?" The elder had him where he wanted him, cornered and low on heart. It was deviously opportunistic on his behalf, but nothing less than what Darius expected. "Alternatively, you can nominate one of your men to fight me instead." Collective gasps sucked the air out of the place. Darius jerked backwards. He wasn't expecting that. The others looked at him, Alia watching the most closely. "While you deliberate, tell me," Rigma continued, a grin stretching from ear to ear. "What happened to the other two? I heard you had a run-in with the resident crocodile. A terrible shame. I should have warned you about him. He's a ferocious reptilian with an appetite that would embarrass most kings." "Quell that mouth of yours, or I'll do it for you." Hellman spat, a hand hovering over his hilt. Angry murmurs ripped through the crowd. For many villagers, this was the first time they had witnessed such rebuke against their leader. Rigma's white robe settled over him as his gaze found Darius once more. "Will you put this man forward?" He stood silently as his men gathered around. "Brother," Alea whispered, "I am half the swordsman you are, but I'll gladly battle this fool." "No, let me face him," Hellman declared. Going by the red lines in his eyes, this was personal for him. Janga was next to offer his weapon, their voices rising in a storm of competing wills. "I'd love to squeeze the life out of the weasel," he said, "but I think this fight belongs to Hellmund." Hellmund agreed. "I should avenge my brother and Gorwald." Darius regarded them all with a weary gaze. "I will ask none of you to duel on my behalf. I made this pledge, and I shall honor it." Hellman bared his teeth before launching a ball of phlegm at the dirt. "With respect, Titling, a bag of shit has more power than you right now," Janga said. "My decision is final." Rigma held his head high. "Then it is time." Darius turned to Aaliyah and placed a hand over his shoulder before leaning into his ears only. "Look at me. If the worst happens, you must carry the torch. Travel to Cladstein and raise the alarm of Vrakor. Tell the mage about me, the prophecy, and our journey up to now. And if he disbelieves me, then at least we tried to do good in the world." Aaliyah's lips pressed together in a slight grimace. "Fine, but just so you know, I will curse your name until my dying breath. Finish him, or else be remembered as the prince who died at the hands of a withered old fart." Darius smiled, resting his forehead on Aaliyah's. They had been through a lot and overcome many things, not least over the past several weeks. Their troubled backgrounds were what bonded them, but it was their loyalty that forged the brotherhood they had today. His face tightened as a surge of vigor and life swelled within him. He glanced at Alicia and then back at Rigma, nodding with purpose, but not haste. "Let's get on with it." The elder half bowed and brushed his lips together in a sign of agreement. "As you wish. Guards, let us down." They brought 2 wooden planks before them and slanted them into the pit. Rigma was handed a scabbard, the hilt wrapped in black leather. He freed the blade, admiring its clean curve, before tucking it back into its sheath and descending the slope. Darius nodded to his men a final time before following suit, the boards warping under his modest weight. His feet had the steadiness of a drunken man, but he made it down to the pit without toppling over. The cavity was much deeper than it appeared from above. He searched for the hilts of his sword and dagger, making sure they hadn't deserted him. A wall of shoulders and faces bared down on him, their eyes glistening in the torchlight. Everyone stood on the tips of their toes to catch sight of the duel. Their demeanor wavered between hope and hopelessness. This fight was about more than just settling a grudge or gaining freedom. It was about the people, Alicia, Samu, and the entire community. When Darius strained around to meet his opposition, the planks had been withdrawn. It was just him and the elder. "There is only one rule." Rigma twirled and stabbed the air as if testing the weight of his blade. "Kill by any means necessary. Any last words?" "Yes. Are you ready to die?" Rigma sneered and charged forward with the agility belonging to a man 15 summers his junior. Darius sluggishly sidestepped, dodging the tip of his sword. Portions of the crowd erupted into cheers and jeers as Elysia remained locked in fear. The elder thrust his blade at Darius once more, grazing his leathery midsection. He staggered back, pain screaming from various parts of his body. He swapped the steel to his left hand and answered Rigma's attack with one of his own. His mind painted images of him bursting forward, slashing and blocking with minimal effort. Instead, every movement felt like it took a day to complete. His sword sweeps were slow and costly, allowing Rigma to counter many of his attacks. The old man smiled brightly. Encouraged by this, he swung his blade in a sweeping motion, forcing Darius to lift his own weapon in order to block the attack. It was a good strike, and he felt the burn travel up his forearm and into his aching chest and shoulders. The crowd grew increasingly animated and uncertain of the outcome. Rigma grimaced and struck again. Darius moved out of the way, throwing him off balance. Had he not been reeling from his injuries, he would have capitalized on the opportunity. Rigma regained his footing and swung his sword wildly back around. Their swords clashed, sending metallic shavings into the air. Darius bared his teeth, his pupils locking with Rigma's. "Do you regret challenging me now?" "Why? When I have the Spirit Mother on my side?" Darius mocked. The old man's eyes glazed over, his smile fading into a menacing frown. Darius roared and kicked his kneecap, staggering him backwards. He swung for Rigma's head, but the older man batted it away. Darius struck again, crying as pain ravaged him. This time, he dislodged the elder's sword. The steel clanged against the earth, sending a plume of dirt into the air that landed on their clothes. Both men panted hard and watched each other for any sudden moves. Instead of reaching for his weapon, Rigma kicked dust in Darius's face and tackled him to the ground. A searing agony suddenly shot through his wounded shoulder. He arched his neck to find the aged man biting down on him like a crazed animal. Darius writhed as Rigma's teeth sank deeper into his exposed wound. He attempted to push him off, but the unspeakable pain had him pinned down. Without warning, the elder rolled off him, his face wide with glee. He picked up his sword and stood over Darius, who lay on the ground, gasping for air. His shoulder throbbed with agony, and his chest heaved as he tried to catch his breath. Rigma readied his steel with a triumphant grin. As he arched it down on Darius, he drew his dagger in time, but the parry sent it flying to the other side of the pit. "You should have nominated one of your men to take your place. You doubted my ability," Rigma panted, raising the weapon above his bald head again. "Now I will send you to your gods with great pleasure." Darius stared up at the hushed audience, many of whom covered their eyes and mouths in anticipation of the inevitable. Alir, Janga, and Hellmund stood among them, all wearing a solemn mask of defeat. Time seemed to stand still. His focus shifted to Alicia, who was positioned at the edge of the pit. She blinked back tears as her jaw and hands trembled as if she had a fever. They each traded subliminal thoughts as noises faded into a muffled whisper. Memories of their brief encounter poured forth, hitting him like a winter's gale. All the questions that ached to be asked, all the talks he wanted to have. A metallic thunk landed nearby. "Darius!" Hellmund shouted. A short sword lay beside him. He glanced down, his mind having trouble grasping the small mercy. Rigma's downward arch halted as he regarded the object, his eyes full of panic. Darius clawed the dagger, and with a roar, sliced his Achilles tendon in one swift movement. Rigma wailed, his face twisting in agony as he crashed into the dirt. Darius staggered to his feet, falling several times in the process. A gasp of astonishment whipped through the crowd like a spear of lightning. Roos and the guards drew closer to the edge, their eyes wider than shields, their skin paler than a pint of goat's milk. "Finish the weasel!" Janga roared. Darius turned to Rigma, who lay in a pool of crimson, clutching his ankle. The elder looked at him, raising his quivering hands in surrender. "I yield!" Darius limped forward and kicked away his sword. "You do not need to do this. I will restore your freedoms and have my men escort you wherever you must go. You've never begged in life. Don't start now in death." "I am not begging. I'm merely making an offer. Guards!" Rigma glanced beyond the pit, but they did nothing. Unlike him, they understood the rules of the tiny arena. A fight is only over when one of the combatants dies. Roos was the only one who displayed a genuine desire to help. But how much of that was motivated by self-interest? He would stand to lose the most from the elder's demise. "Spare yourself some dignity." Darius readied the blade. "Pride and reputation are illusions, ideas inflated by those with egos," Rigma hissed. "When you die, the virtues you embodied pass away too. Nothing evades the void, not even the most legendary of legacies." "Are those your last words?" He sneered. "Enjoy this victory, for you won't have many more." Darius plunged the dagger into his chest, all the way to the hilt. The elder's eyes bulged, his mouth hacking and coughing. Killing was never something Darius liked, but he took joy from this one. The spectators fell silent as the life extinguished from their leader's pupils. Darius freed the steel from his lifeless body and let it lay in an ever-swelling pool of crimson. A wall of shocked faces stared down at him, not a single whimper registering in his ears. "I am Darius Rakes," he addressed the crowd, barely able to stand. "I am not your liberator, nor am I your enemy. I'm merely a man who fought for my freedom, and that of my men. I thought surviving the Grelithia would be enough to secure that. Sadly it wasn't," he heaved a deep breath. "That meant spilling your leader's blood in this very pit. A kill I take little pride in, but it's in moments like these I am reminded that in death comes rebirth. He stumbled sideways, avoiding toppling over. "Gali Gali, you now have a chance to forge a new destiny." "What do you mean?" a faceless villager called out. Darius looked around for the man, unable to see him. "You are no longer enslaved to Rigma, nor his ideas. You are free to choose your own path and elect a leader you believe in." The crowd was stunned into silence. Nobody had ever given them such power before. "I will lead." Roos stepped forward. Darius's eyes narrowed over the sheer audacity. "No, you won't," he barked. "Then who else?" Was Elder Rigma's advisor. There is no one better in Silk Hall who understands what it takes to rule our tribe." "That's the problem. Change must come from outside Silk Hall." Darius's gaze settled on Alicia, who shifted uncomfortably. "If you, the people, will allow me, I have a suggestion." Alicia shook her head vigorously, begging him to stop before he said words that could not be unsaid. "No!" Roos barked. "You're a foreigner with no right to meddle in our affairs." "Let him finish," a villager demanded. Darius staggered once more. "Someone help him!" He held up a hand and waited for the crowd to simmer down. His eyelids hung low, but he was determined to put forward his suggestion. "The person I speak of knows the Gali Gali people well. Like you, they weren't born into the Silk Hall. She was raised by honest parents." "She," came a distant cry. "A woman has never led this clan before." Roos added, "It's preposterous." The guardsmen shifted. Even they had an opinion on the matter. Darius waited for the groans to dissipate before continuing. "She may be a woman," he said, "but she has the strength and heart of a warrior." Portions of the crowd were deeply unsure, but he could see the seeds of curiosity sprouting. "Who is this woman you speak of?" Roos's shrill voice still irked Darius, even while enduring so much pain. He glanced at Alicia, offering a smile that hinted it would all be okay. "Your sister." "I have never heard such absurdity in my life," Roos spat. Darius pointed towards him, his eyes firmly fixed on the villagers. "Have you ever wondered why he stands in a white robe and she does not?" Everyone shared confused glances. "Would you like to share the story of Samu, or shall I?" Roos's cheeks turned red as he darted hateful looks at Alicia. "Do not listen to this foreigner," he scorned. "He has murdered our elder and is trying to endanger our way of life. This so-called protector of yours betrayed his own brother. His reward?" "A seat in Silk Hall," Darius countered. Gasps flooded the underground dwelling. "Lies! Don't believe him!" Roos yelled. "Samu wasn't a traitor. He tried liberating this tribe, to offer you all a life out of servitude. But this lump of filth told on him." "We've heard enough," Roos insisted. "Guards, seize him." Darius waited for the guardsmen to come down and arrest him, but neither came. Instead, they detained the ill-equipped advisor. "What are you doing?" Roos stammered. "I am your chief counselor. Release me with immediate effect." "It's over," Darius coughed. "No one in this tribe wants to live in bondage any longer." Roos snarled as they took him away, leaving behind a stunned crowd. A taste of revolution and lasting change hung in the air. "As we stand here, we are in a unique position." Darius emptied his mouth of blood. "It would be wrong of me not to warn you that a great evil is rising in the southeasterly corner of Estos." "What do you speak of?" came a panicked voice. "The Dark Lord, Vrakor." "You jest." "I do not. I have seen him with my own eyes, in my dreams, in this very forest. He is raising an army as we speak in the shadows of Cordon, of the likes not witnessed before. You must be ready to act when it's time." "Who foretold this?" came another question. "A seer." Angry murmurs broke out. "When will he attack?" came a frail, elderly voice. "I'm not sure. It could be today, tomorrow, or in a year. All I know is that he will come, and when he does, he'll bring destruction and chaos to our lands." The crowd fell silent, contemplating the severity of Darius's words. Alicia wore a distant, terrified stare. He knew that look well, for he had worn it many times himself. Alir and Janga, both reserved until now, seemed struck by his speech. It was as if the atmosphere of the pit amplified his warning. Helmond, on the contrary, remained mostly unfazed by the revelation. I say this not to scare you, but to warn you that you cannot afford to be in disarray when the time comes. You can spend weeks deliberating your next leader, or you can elect Alicia. She may be unproven and without high standing, but she holds a deep love and loyalty for her people. He glanced at her as she waded to the front of the clansfolk, her timidness subsiding for matters more important than her feelings. It was as if she had grown from a shadow into a pillar of strength, all in a matter of seconds. "I am Alicia," she said softly. Her cheeks reddened as the crowd stared at her, but they soon melted away as she found her voice. "I am the daughter of Ismeria and Elex. They were honest, hard-working Gali. I was raised to value my fellow man and care for those around me. My greatest fear is that I would grow old and see this tribe continue to suffer under Silk Hall, under Elder Rigma and Roos's rule. I don't know how good a leader I'll be for you, nor can I promise changes will happen overnight, but I swear on my mother and father's souls that I will give everything to protect and serve you." The crowd mumbled approvingly. "If what he says is true," she continued, "then we must unite as one people. We cannot afford to be divided or weak when the enemy's shadow draws near. We must stand together if we are to prevent such darkness from befalling us." Her voice was unwavering, her determination resonating around the pit. Darius nodded in approval, impressed by her spirit. "Raise your hand if you elect this woman to be your leader." One by one, the villagers stretched out their arms, forming an unyielding wall near Alicia. A rapturous smile graced her lips as she locked eyes with Darius, bringing the world to a standstill. The people had spoken. She was now their elder. Chapter 22. 1 month had passed since the tribe elected Alicia. Much had already changed around the hamlet for the better. Gone were the servitude, peasantry, and predetermined roles at birth. Villagers were actively encouraged to pursue trades and focus on where their strengths lay. Such autonomy was a foreign concept to them at first, but they swiftly embraced the change. Another one of the more drastic improvements came to Silk Hall. Besides scrubbing what remnants remained of Rigma's reign, Alicia made it a rule that they had a weekly council, which included senior members of the tribe. Seats were no longer afforded to the astute or those with high standing. No, everybody worked together to solve the tribe's problems, not just the few belonging to Silk Hall. One such issue was schools. There were growing calls for setting up a small classroom for children aged up to 13 summers, to which Alicia agreed. Education and open minds were the driving forces for lasting change. This was imperative for the tribe if they were to realize her ambitions of leaving the forest and their underground dwelling behind. But these were challenges for tomorrow, as there were enough to deal with today. Either way, the future appeared bright for the Gali clan, even if the threat of Vrako still loomed in their thoughts. Darius awoke in the soft furs of a tent. He hadn't slept so well, or so deeply, in a long time. The air permeated with herbs and other floral scents. He lay quietly, thinking about the past 4 weeks. He could feel the newly formed scars covering his chest, shoulder, and palm. Though his wounds had mostly healed, a subtle throb remained in some areas, to remind him of how lucky he had been. He cast a glance to the corner, where a pile of bandages leaned against the basin he used to bathe. Next to it was a mirror, with a crack running diagonally across it, which reflected a distorted image of him from the stomach up. A villager had thankfully scissored his hair back to a short and manageable length. He couldn't go on any longer looking like a feral animal. He encouraged Alir, Janga, and Helman to get theirs cut, but they settled on a mere trim. Darius sighed and slowly sat up. While rest was important, so too was moving. He feared lasting stiffness as much as aggravating his old injuries. Alicia rolled over, blissfully unaware of his distracted state. He shook his head in admiration more than anything else. It was only a week ago that he summoned the courage to tell her who he really was. He felt compelled to, especially as their relationship evolved so rapidly. She was stunned at first, but it didn't come as a complete shock. She suspected there was more to him than he let on. The revelation about the Dark Lord only heightened such suspicions. To Darius' surprise, she took the news well. However, they agreed to keep it private for a time. She loathed keeping secrets, but feared this would be too much for the tribe right now. Many still harbored disdain towards the Rakes and Tadol bloodlines, and if they found out she was sharing a bed with one, it could undermine everything Alicia was trying to build. She yawned and began stirring. "Sleep well, my lady?" She shoved him playfully. "I am Elder Alicia, and you'll address me as such." "How rude of me. My apologies, Elder." "That's better. One more slip-up, and I shall have you working with Roos in the stables." "Oh, will you now?" He leaned in and kissed her soft lips. "I still cannot believe you spared him after what he did to your family. Shows heart. Vengeance doesn't always require spilt blood." Darius found a cool part of the wooden headboard that lent a reprieve from the heat coming off the coals. "I suppose the hard work is doing him some good. He no longer shares the shape of a ball." They laughed quietly, careful not to make too much noise. The villagers were unaware of their relationship, although it was clear some had their suspicions. Alir warned him of such. Alicia's face took on a distant stare, her bare shoulders peering over the furs. "What's wrong?" Darius asked. Do you have to leave today?" "I don't want to depart any more than you want me to. The seer's prediction does not halt for anybody, not least us. For all we know, my father could have already died, and Dillion now rules Vlencia. Besides, my men are growing restless. But you haven't fully recovered yet. I can hunt, wield a sword, bathe, and even ride a horse, so that's a stark improvement. That doesn't mean you are not prone to injury," she said. They laid in silence before Alicia spoke again. "I'm sorry for wanting to keep you here. It is selfish of me. A heavy burden has been placed on your shoulders, not mine. It's just losses have plagued my life. I do not want to lose another person I love." Her talk stunned Darius. Love was a complex emotion, one that he had never truly encountered. He held immense feelings for Alicia, but never had the words, "I love you," passed through his lips. It didn't mean that what he felt was anything less than that. It was just too soon and complicated. Knowing they may never see each other again once he departs only compounded the confliction further. The journey to Vlencia was a one-way road. Either he succeeded or he failed and died. There was no middle outcome. Darius held Alicia close, her soft cheek nestled against his chest. He listened to the steady rhythm of her breathing as they lay there in contemplative silence. "I will miss this," she whispered. "As will I." He laid down, and they embraced in a passionate kiss, their tongues dancing, begging the other to dance a while longer. When Darius peeled away, he took in the many distant silhouettes that walked past their tent. "The Spirit Mother has told me we'll meet again," she said. "But not for some time." "That's more than what my gods tell me, so I'll take it." Alicia smiled and climbed out of bed, her body soft and enticing. She dressed in a robe, which was made from humble materials by some of the village women. It had sleeves that draped 2/3 of her arms and carried a hood that cushioned her shoulder blades. She specifically asked for it not to be white or bright, as she believed it acted like a visual divider between her and the people. There was much to be admired about her leadership and how swiftly she took to the role. "Where are you going?" Darius inquired. "To gather supplies and guards to escort you," she replied. "If the path is kind, it will take 4 days to reach the Vlencian border." Darius's heart quickened by the prospect. He had imagined this moment countless times, but now that it was approaching, his body became flooded with anticipation and nerves. "When they are ready, I'll find you." "Okay," he nodded. With that, she left the tent flap, her silhouette disappearing. Darius pulled in a deep breath, taking just as long to release it. He got out of bed and changed into his leather armor. Alicia got it repaired and cleaned, but much to her displeasure, it still held an old scent. While his shoulder hadn't fully allayed the stiffness, his other injuries had since lost their sensitive edge. She gifted him a sword belt, which was a welcome addition to his attire. She even had the local blacksmith sharpen his swords. Thanks to Darius and his men, her people were discovering and fast learning new trades, thus kick-starting their own economy. Darius paused for a moment before sneaking out of the tent. He spotted Janga, Allaire, and Hellmund in the distance, feasting on something by the communal fire. He waded through the passing villagers, pausing only to give a nod to a few of the children who had a habit of running up to him. Janga chuckled, sitting strongly on the log. "You're quickly becoming a local hero, Titling. Wash your mouth out. I do not want young minds learning your crass tongue." Darius frowned, stealing a piece of fruit from his hand. "Why not? I know it's you that has them calling me strange names. It is only fair they learn yours." "I'm afraid you've lost me," Darius sniggered. "Oh, the name Lardy eludes you now, does it?" Hellmund and Allaire laughed, shaking their heads as they bit into their harvest. "I think it suits you well. Maybe the children are onto something." Jenga grunted his displeasure. "Are we set for departure?" Allaire asked. Darius sunk his teeth into the fruit, a torrent of sweet liquid trickling down his throat. "Yes. Alicia is gathering supplies and men to escort us as we speak. With some luck, we should reach Vlencia in 4 days, give or take." "And then what?" "We travel to Cladstein. The mage may be our only hope." Hellmund appeared bemused. "What is it?" "I simply do not have a high opinion of wizards, that's all." "But you defend seers." "They are different." "How so?" "They do not uphold moralist views, nor do they disfigure and banish those who possess a unique magic." "He's got a point," Janga added. "Without the mage of Cladstein, the power remains with Dillion," Darius said. "Too many will pledge their fealty to him, if they haven't already." "It's true," Allaire chimed in from across the fire pit. "Few dare to challenge the sorcerer. His kind may have disappeared into obscurity, but they still possess loud and influential voices, even as far as Elron. Estos is one of the few regions that forbid magic users, but it also knows it cannot contain them." "Then why haven't they left?" Janga asked. "Wizards aren't nomadic. Besides, why should they be forced to leave their homes? Men are mortals, and an inferior race. They will outlive us all." Allaire's reply seemed to have the big man thinking. Hellmund shook his head, turning to Darius. "What makes you think they'll take your side?" "I like to believe they cannot ignore the threat in Cordon. Vrakor is as much a danger to Estos as he is to them. To defeat the Dark Lord, men and wizards must unite once again. The mage won't gain such an alliance with Dillion." "How certain are you of that?" "I may not know my brother as well as I thought I did, but going by his lust for power, he will not want to share it with anyone." "And what about Elron?" "What about them? If you regain the throne, how do you plan to get them on side?" Darius sighed dejectedly. Even Janga and Allaire's faces hinted at the enormous challenge such a task presented. "The road ahead presents challenges I am yet to find solutions for," he said, getting lost in the flames. "One step at a time." Very reassuring. Darius shot a fiery gaze at Hellmund, maintaining it without a single blink. "If reassurance is what you're here for, then you will sadly be disappointed," Hellman smiled and nodded, his eyes firmly locked. His lips twitched, but nothing came of it. Darius broke from their heated standoff when a mass of people and horses approached. It was Alicia and a band of guards. Darius stood to greet them. "Good to see you, milady." Janga's bow was unbecoming of him. "It's elder to you." She smiled. "Forgive me. I'm a slow learner." "I'll remember that," Alea quipped. She fought hard not to hover too long on Darius, and instead addressed them all. "There is a horse for each of you. They are gifts from our tribe for everything you have done. We do not have many, so treat them well, and they shall return in kind." "Thank you, Alicia." Alea nodded, always the gracious one. "And supplies?" Darius inquired. "While basic, the rations should last you 5 days," she said. "Enough to see you through to Vlencia." "Good, good." He studied her for longer than he should have. Janga cleared his throat, spotting their obvious unwillingness to part. "Something in my waters tells me Alea, Hellman, and I ought to pack up our things." Darius and Alicia's cheeks flushed red. Janga led the 3 of them away to gather their belongings. Alicia also ordered her men to give her and Darius a moment, to which they obliged, taking the horses. They kept a fair distance apart, mindful of passers-by. "I am grateful for all you have done," Darius said. "As I am you." She glanced around, then suddenly leaned in and pulled the trinket from beneath his collar, caressing it. A smile broke across her face as warm memories rose to the surface. "Samu will be proud of what you've become." Tears welled in her eyes. "Never stop wearing this." "I won't." Their foreheads came together as he wrapped his arm around her waist, pulling her closer. She flinched at the contact, but he held her firm. They breathed heavily, both yearning for more, but knowing it was too risky to do so. She planted a kiss on his cheek and whispered, "Come back to me. I'll be waiting. In this life or the next, I swear it." Janga, Alea, and Hellmund re-emerged from their shared tent, each carrying a satchel made from tattered leather. "Ready yet, Tittling?" Darius sighed, finally releasing Alicia. "Your mouth!" "What can I say? Old habits and all that." Darius turned around to face the men he would tread through hell with, a sense of foreboding settling over him. Unlike the forest, he knew exactly what dangers lay ahead. Weapons would collide, hearts would be broken, and old scores would be settled. The path wasn't for the faint-hearted, it was for kings. He gripped the hilt of his sword, ready to take on the fight that would decide not only his fate, but that of the entire region. "Mount up, we ride to Vlencia." The story continues in Last Alliance. If you crave more untold stories of the divided region and want to be the first to know when the next part drops, then join the Legion today. You'll also immediately be gifted the free prequel of the series in both ebook and audiobook. Find the link in the description.